Everybody, we're going to call to order the April 24th Zoning Commission meeting. I need a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Second. Please call.
Mr. Hall?
Aye.
Mr. Reagan?
Aye.
Mr. Green?
Aye.
Mr. Lewis?
Aye. Okay, the second item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the March 27th, 2017 meeting. It appears that we don't have 3 of the 5 commissioners that were at that meeting, so we're going to table that to the next meeting. And I would like to, we have 2 cases tonight. First case, we'll go to in a minute. The second case is a quasi-judicial hearing. It's with the public case 1-217 PUD for the Tim Hortons. Since this is a quasi-judicial, we're going to have to go through a few procedures. First, I'll outline the procedures the Commission will follow in the hearing and decide the matter. Under the zoning resolution, our decision is subject to appeal to the Board of Township Trustees and then to the Court of Common Pleas. As a result, we must employ different procedures than from the cases that are typically presented to the Zoning Commission. Because this is a quasi-judicial proceeding, the Commission will only receive evidence as to whether the application meets or does not meet the standards and criteria in the zoning resolution. We do not want to hear opinions, just facts. As a result, all persons presenting testimony before the Commission, whether for or against the applicant's position, may only do so after being sworn in and being subject to cross-examination. The staff will present a summary of the application. The application will then present its case. The board members may ask questions of the staff and anyone who speaks on behalf of the applicant. If an attorney presented the case for the applicant, the attorney is not sworn in and is not considered to be a witness. As a result, the attorney's statements are not considered as evidence. Evidence only comes in through the witnesses who testify before the Commission after being sworn in. The burden is on the applicant to present evidence that the application satisfies the standards and the criteria for approval. After the applicant presents its case through the witnesses, all persons in the audience supporting the application will be permitted to testify one at a time after being recognized by the chair. When the persons supporting the application are finished, those opposed to the application will then be permitted to testify after being recognized by the chair. If anyone in opposition to is represented by an attorney, that party will go first and then followed by members of the audience. As previously stated, all persons wishing to testify, whether for or against the application, may only do so by being sworn in. When testifying, each person from the audience may come forward to the podium, it's in front of us here, after being recognized and speak out to the microphone and state their name, address, and affiliation to the case. All persons testifying will be limited to 4 minutes unless a Commission member requests that they be giving additional time. All testimony is directed to the Commission only. No comments or questions are to be directed to the applicant or anyone else in the audience. The Commission will only hear new, non-repetitive evidence or questions. Should someone wish to show support of a previous testimony, they may do so by following the testimony procedures and stating their support of previous testimony. So if anyone's here for the second case, the Tim Horton, please stand at this time. Okay. Raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Okay. We'll now go with item 3 on the agenda, public hearing of case 1-88 Anderson for the major modification for 1270 Nagel Road, Zone 00, Planned Office. Staff, you want to start it?
Thank you. Mr. Feist is going to present this case tonight.
Okay.
Thank you, Paul. The applicant today is Bob Carpenter from CSS Signs, and he is representing on behalf of Cincinnati Federal, the property owner. The location is 1270 Nagel Road, which is Zone 00 Office District. And what they're requesting is the expansion of an existing freestanding sign with the addition of an electronic message center. So a little bit about the case. In January of 1991, the development case 188 was originally planned for a 40 $1,000 square foot office building for the site. But later, the office, or the final development plan, which was approved for the construction of the 25,000, or 2,500 square foot Cincinnati Federal, which is there today, and the 10,000 square foot Goddard School building. In 2001, the minor modification was approved for the relocation expansion of the existing freestanding sign. On October of 2013, a major modification was approved for a 50 square foot freestanding sign with an electronic reader board for the Goddard School, though that has not been constructed, and you'll hear about that later in the case. And lastly, in April 28th of 2014, a major modification was approved for the Goddard School for a 5,900 square foot addition. So right here shows a property map. Basically, to the left there is Nagel Road. The tract size is just just over 1 acre. It's 1.183 acres, and there's 248 feet of frontage on Nagel Road, though most of the frontage is right-of-way, as there's a 30-foot right-of-way distance from the sign, or from the existing sign to Nagel. This is a topography map. As you can see, it kind of shows there's a dip as you go towards the sign. The dip, it kind of is pretty important to this case because other than that, it's relatively flat. As you can see in this aerial here, the red line is near the start of the property, technically, and that's where the dip begins. It goes about 2 to 3 feet down, and making up the 2-3 feet is a stone base, which kind of helps the existing freestanding sign be visible from Nagel. With that being said, the modification of the sign increases the total size from 32 square feet, which is current, to 48.5 square feet, and this does not include the base, as you can see below, the stone base. The proposed LED message would cover less than 50% of the overall sign, and the proposed sign would utilize the base, which is 52.9 square feet, to kind of elevate the sign out of the detention basin. Without the base, which by the way is 37, it's a little over 3 feet tall, the sign is 51 inches in height. So the overall height exceeds 6 feet with the base included. So with that, the total area of the base and the sign have to be included for the square footage of the sign. Therefore, a variance for the modification is being requested from Article 5.5 G1E, which requires a 32 square foot minimum, which is what it is right now. I mean maximum. These are just some site photos, as you can see. This is currently looking from the existing basin, kind of south of the property. As you can see, it just shows kind of the dip and Nagel Road, where it's not even with Nagel Road. This is from up above. It just represents the signage, kind of shows how far away Cincinnati Federal is from the actual sign, and it shows the dip as well. Once again, this is just a different view looking northwest, I believe, at the sign. This view represents the 30-foot right-of-way really well. It shows that it kind of could be somewhat difficult for some to see or to even notice the sign from Nagel Road, and it just emphasizes, yeah, that's the sign up close. Shows the detail of what it is right now. And once again, the It shows how far away the sign is. That's from the sign currently to the existing Cincinnati Federal. Staff found that the applicant is proposing an increase in the freestanding sign. The applicant asserts the variance is in harmony with the intent of the OO Plan District. Basically, what the sign would be used for is to be able to be identified from the street and differentiate it from other institutions. The applicant also asserts that the smaller text currently could be hard to read for oncoming passengers and people maybe not familiar with the area, so this would kind of get rid of potential distractions for unfamiliar drivers. And lastly, it'll have no adverse effects on any of the adjacent property owners to those in the vicinity. With that, staff recommends approval of the sign modifications based off the following conditions in the staff report. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask me or Paul.
And I just wanted to clarify on one thing. The electronic message center is a permitted, electronic message centers are permitted in any zoning district. So that is really not the issue. The issue is a larger freestanding sign in the planned office district. And this is considered a major modification because it specifically limited, in the improving resolution with the zone change, it specifically limited the signage to what is permitted in the zoning resolution. So this is larger than what is normally permitted for office zoning districts. So.
Okay. We'll start down here. Commissioner Boone, any questions?
None at this time.
Commissioner Reagan?
Yes. Do you know if the messages will run 24/7 or just during the daylight hours?
Well, we can ask the audience to...
Why don't we finish up with staff, then we'll come to the applicant. So, no, if you don't know, we'll wait to ask the applicant. Is it just for the staff questions at this point?
We'll wait for the applicant.
So, yeah, we
Anything
can...
else, Mr. Reagan?
No.
Commissioner Eliff?
Yes. Do you guys have an aerial photo of this?
Mm-hmm.
There it is. Oh, well, across the street from, across from Nagel, it mentions some single-family residence over there. I'm trying to recollect because I know across the street those houses have transitioned to business. There's an accountant's office, I recall. There's a dry cleaner closer to Beachmont.
A musical instrument.
Yeah, are there still
Dentist office.
residential?
There are still one or two single families. One is, we know, is actively used as a single family. There is one that is, we're not sure if it's being used as a single family or not. However, it's still zoned for single family.
Mhm.
There are some that have been converted to office and have been rezoned to office.
So
There's also
some
a
of those
church
have
in
been
the vicinity.
rezoned, but some of them, yeah, the church
Yes,
is there. But some
yes.
of them are still residential, but, okay.
Correct.
All right. Let's see here, Mr. Stewart, I think I had one more. Okay, so they're asking for an increase from 32 square feet to about 50, and half of that would be the electronic message center. So in the office, we are allowed 32 square feet. There's a lot of e-retail near there. What's the sign specs allowed for that? Is it the same or is it larger?
It's larger. In the retail zoning district, properties are permitted half a square foot per their street frontage, a minimum of 50 square feet if they do not have the frontage. So a minimum of 50 square feet is permitted, and then a maximum of 100 square feet. But again, it's based off of your frontage.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Question about, I understand the base has to be included in the calculation, and there's the contour drops off. If this was even with the ground, or if there was a earthen berm, would this be here today? Would it still be beyond the 32?
Yes, it would still be, because the 48 square feet excludes the base. The base is 52 square feet.
And is it powered today, the sign?
I believe it is, or it was, yes.
Okay. Okay. Other questions? And we'll go for the applicant. You want to? We'll go back over to Commissioner Boone. Any questions for the applicant?
Well, I had the same thought that Patrick had, so I'll let Patrick ask the question.
Okay. Commissioner Reagan?
Yes, will the messages be broadcast 24/7 or just during the daylight hours?
They are programmable either way.
Okay. And what kind of messages is the bank going to display? What kind of messages will be displayed?
Basically, things to promote business for them and so forth, different programs they would be having. Mr. Schuler's here, could speak better to that. Anybody I was here more for technical questions about the board itself.
Okay.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Commissioner Wheeler?
Yes, the electronic message center, can you tell us a little bit about self-dimming features and also what sort of impact that will have on the residential that is directly across the street?
Certainly, not a problem. First off, they have a multi-stage photo cell to them with about 250 different settings. So it's not just on or off, up or down. It's quite fine-tuned. And basically, it's set up as the darker it gets out, the dimmer the sign gets because it doesn't require brightness. And it actually would dazzle you if it was on full brightness. And that's all controllable and programmable and fine-tunable. So if it's not working well in that situation, we can actually go into the brainworks of it and reset it. And so it's got complete control to where you can meet whatever circumstances are, because different communities have different standards.
So if you had it on the lowest setting or a low setting, how noticeable, I mean, how far would you say that sign is going to be from the residence that's across the street?
How
I mean,
far is it going to be from them?
Yes.
It's a given distance from the sign to the residence.
What is that distance?
That I don't know.
Wouldn't that affect how light or dark it needs to be?
Oh, no. In other words, the light and dark would be no different than any other light in the area, like a porch light or anything else, really. As far
You don't
as
have
being-
any-
If you talk about it being a nuisance or a glare type thing.
I'm just asking how noticeable it's going to be to the people in the house that's across the street.
Unless they're looking at it, they wouldn't notice it at all.
Okay.
But
What's the basis
basically,
of that?
It would be legible at all hours.
What's the basis of your statement that it wouldn't be noticeable?
The basis of that is that the settings are already made to keep it from being a nuisance. I'm assuming you're talking about offensive noticing rather than pleasurable noticing. Like if you were on your porch and you wanted to see what the sign said, yes, you would be able to read it. Would it interfere with your TV program? No.
So you'd say it probably wouldn't be any more noticeable than a typical internally lit sign like is there today?
Not really. It would be the same comparable lighting, and it would basically be just as the same noticeability because they don't allow scrolling here. Now, if you had a lot of motion, yes, it would be noticeable because that would attract your eye, just the motion in it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's also covered by your code here too, about how many seconds they have to be on, and in between message changes and so forth. So that's all programmable to meet your standards.
Thank you.
Okay. No further questions? Any questions for Mr. Schuler from Cincinnati Federal? Do we need to call him up? Nope.
While I'm up here, I did want to address one subject that was brought up about the square footage of the base.
Okay.
That entire base, primarily as your photos show, just barely brings the sign up to grade. The top of that base is at ground level for the area. So basically speaking, the sign's really starting out at ground level, and I don't feel that the added square footage of the base should even be considered in it, because if the ground were flat and level there would be no base.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We have anyone?
I did have a question for Mr. Schuler.
Mr. Schuler, would you come up, please? Commissioner Eliff.
Hi, Mr. Schuler. Thanks for coming. So the new sign that you're proposing, how do you see that fitting in with your business as opposed to the current sign you have there now?
It certainly is updating the sign. Our logo's changed, so that will change as well. And I see it as we are a community bank. We're proud to be a community bank. We are sponsors for the beach ball players. I can see using community messages on that sign as well to say, well, we do have loans. We have community consumer type loans. This technology doesn't allow people to know that. So not a scrolling, but to change that. We have a community shred day, which is open to everybody in the community. Shred day comes June 10th for our place. And we have a shred truck there. Anybody with shredding materials, that would be, that's how we intend to use that. Our neighbors, as a matter of fact, looking up this way, as you can see, is Anderson Pub and Grill. The houses you see across the street up further in this view, the one that the one gentleman said, we're not sure. I mean, I've seen people come out with briefcases. I'm not sure what that house is used for. There is a residential right across the street, which we have worked with as far as how our grass is cut. We were cutting it one way, apparently, and it was going across the street. He asked us not to do that. We said, absolutely, we're sure. But he, from his porch, even from his driveway, that's dead on, that's straight on, he can't see the light from that because of his view from his property is such that, matter of fact, if you see the one that shows the overhead view of the basin, you can see where somebody's standing on that side nearly 100 feet away. Yes, he's across, the driveway in his house is right there. He really couldn't see that sign because that's a dead spot. And so for that consideration, and we certainly want to think of our neighbors. The other thing with that basin, we did work with Anderson Township back in, I think, '95 it was, and they said, hey, look, it's better to have this basin for the community, as a matter of fact, because that drains the Goddard, it helps do the post office next to us. That accumulates water when it rains, and then it seeps into the ground. So that's why the base really shouldn't be included in that, because we worked with the community, with you guys on that, and so to include that, you really can't see it going through the street because it's down. So that's how we intend to use it. Yeah, it's going to be lit like it is today, overnight, but as Bob attested to, that it's not going to be a blaring, screaming light. It's going to be very close to what's out there now.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody wish to speak in opposition to the sign in the audience? Okay. That said, we're going to open up for discussion among ourselves, or I'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to approve. Public hearing, case 188 Anderson for major modification to the final development plan for an expansion of the existing freestanding sign to allow for the addition of an electronic message board. Property is located at 1270 Nagel Road, zoned 00, planned office, filed by R.A. Carpenter of Carpenter Sign Service on behalf of Cincinnati Federal Savings and Loan Association, property owner, and I think I would leave it at that.
Approve as stated. Do I have a second?
Second.
Senator Pender, please call the roll.
Can we have just a little bit of discussion on that before we vote on that?
Sure.
Yeah, I was just going to comment that I didn't even realize there was still residential across the street there, so I don't see it having detrimental impact on that area. And I agree with the comments that the base certainly is just raising that up to the plane of the existing elevation of the street. And then lastly, I'd add that I do think it is not really out of character at all for that area, considering its relative location to Beachmont and really the change in that little section of Nagel there. So thank you for the additional comment.
Okay, great. Okay, we have a first and a second. Can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Ella?
Aye.
Mr. Lewis?
Aye.
Mr. Reagan?
Aye.
Mr. Boone?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to the second case tonight. 1-2017 PUD. Do a staff report.
Thank you. The applicant is Greg Dale with McBride Dale Clarion, who is representing 7716 Beachmont LLC, who is the property owner. The location is at 7716 Beachmont, and the zoning there is E retail. The request is a PUD, a planned unit development application to develop a 2,095 square foot drive-through restaurant. As far as history, we did not have much history on this site. We did issue a zoning certificate in 1988 for the former Kentucky Fried Chicken, which has since closed, so the restaurant is vacant. Other than the original application, we've had sign applications for and facade improvements for the restaurant, the Kentucky Fried Chicken, but we have no other history on this property. This is a Cages drawing, and the property does encompass both of these parcels. Beachmont Avenue is to the, I'm sorry, I'm not using my red pen, so you can't see that in the audience. So it does include both parcels. This is Beachmont Avenue here to the south. The surrounding zoning is all E-retail. There is a small parcel that goes to the north of this that is still zoned E-retail. This building here, which is just off of the Cage drawing, is a warehouse type building that does house a couple of businesses in it. The property directly to the east is a multi-use building as well. There's a restaurant or bar, retail, and then offices in that building. And then to the west is Frisch's. Across the street is a shopping center as well. So it's in the heart of Beachmont Avenue, and this actually falls within our downtown Anderson plan, which we'll discuss shortly. Topography map is the site is flat. This is the aerial of the existing Kentucky Fried Chicken. The current configuration, the parking, and again, this building will be raised, and the building, a new construction is proposed. This is the existing configuration of the restaurant, single lane in and single lane out with a one-way configuration, angled parking along the right side or the east side of the property, and then parking along the back. And this is their current dumpster enclosure. There is a access drive that has been rerouted to be exit only, and this was part of the downtown implementation and the ODOT project for access management on Beachmont Avenue. So this was all part of that. This is on the property that is owned by Beachmont LLC. There is an easement that allows the property to the east to use that as an exit only. And then there is also parking that is on this property as well. So the property, the outline in red is accurate, and there is easement and sharing of parking. This is the site plan of the proposed Tim Hortons. Again, the site plan, I'm sorry for the quality, when we scan these in, they just did not come out very good on the projector. ODOT has requested and required a single access to help consolidate curb cuts on Beachmont Avenue. So since there is already one exit lane coming out for the property next door, they are requiring a single point of access here, so it'll be enter and exit This Tim Hortons is a heavy drive-through user, so they are having the configuration and still using the angled parking, but one-way circulation around the building through the drive-through and then also a bypass lane. The building is pushed up as close as they can to allow for that bypass and drive-through lane to circle around the building to get back to the access point over here. So, and we'll talk about our downtown plans. Again, parking is proposed. That is consistent with the township's parking requirements. They are just under 10%, or right at 10% below the optimum, which is permitted. Other features of this, I guess we'll go to the pictures, it'll be easier to see. Well, we have the sign package first, so we'll go ahead and go to the sign package. This was the site plan or the concept plan for the signage for the property. They are requesting a face change of the existing freestanding sign. The existing freestanding sign is non-conforming as it sits 6 feet from the edge of pavement and Beachmont Avenue and is required to be 10 feet back. So the sign is a non-conforming sign. Height-wise, it is conforming. It is 15 feet, and size-wise, however, it does, it's not set back 10 feet from the edge of pavement or outside the right-of-way. Well, it is outside the right-of-way. It's just not set back 10 feet. The other signage is compliant, the wall signage, and these are also elevation drawings of the building. And then we do have a sample rendering. This is not an exact replica, but a sample rendering of the proposed Tim Hortons would look like. Mixture of building materials, some brick, some siding, different colors. The one that is proposed for Anderson has a door on the side versus a door on the front. So the main entrance would actually be on the right, but it does have a, if we go back to the elevation drawings. And again, the sign package, which is noted in our zoning, or our staff report, does not actually match what the site plan does. So we have some comments about that as we go along in our presentation. But this is just to give you an idea. This would be looking from Beachmont Avenue, although this door would not be here, it would be on the side. But the signage, and again, just the overall look of the restaurant would be similar. So existing site photos, the existing, or the former Kentucky Fried Chicken. It did have landscaping and actually 2 sidewalks across the frontage of the property. But this kind of gives you an idea looking toward Wolf Angle at Frisch's next door, Capples, and then Valvoline, and then Wolf Angle. This was the exit drive from the parking as well as the drive-through. This was looking back in the other direction toward Beachmont Avenue. This is the area in the back. The green area in this building is not included in this application. It's under separate ownership. And this green strip and the building are zoned retail. So there are residential properties here, but since it's not adjacent, there is a buffer, and that's not part of this application. Again, just looking across the street, is Panera and FedEx to give you an idea. This is the property, the rear of the property next door, which has several tenants in it and parking in the back as well as in the front. In this picture here, this is La Rosa's and the shopping center adjacent to La Rosa's. This is the exit drive that is used for the property to the west. However, it's on the property in question tonight. So with the planned unit development, first we look at zoning resolution compliance. There are several areas that are not compliant with the materials that were submitted to us. Most of those are in regard to parking. The first parking space from the front as you pull in is not set back 30 feet, so that should be corrected. And that's 30 feet from the right-of-way. The parking stall sizes in the back along the rear, along the dumpster enclosure, are not 9 by 19, which is standard. The plan did not show bicycle parking, did not show off-street loading space, and then also the lighting plan was not compliant in certain areas. The foot candles were too high at the property line. This is the Anderson Plan, with the Anderson Plan, which is the Township's comprehensive plan, adopted earlier this year in January, the update. The use is consistent, and these are, we picked out chapters of the comprehensive plan where we felt that the use of the restaurant was consistent with the plan. Anderson Trails Plan, there is connectivity with, well, there is a proposed sidewalk, and actually, I think I talk about this later in the presentation, but two projects that are currently underway or will be underway shortly this year. One is the implementation of the streetscape improvements from the downtown plan. And the downtown plan is from Asbury up to about Town Center Way. What is proposed with that area, and again, this was consistent with our adopted downtown plan, is a narrowing of the lanes of the 4 travel lanes, the 2 lanes in each direction in the center turn lane, to allow for the construction of a sidewalk into the right-of-way. So the lanes will be narrowed and a sidewalk will be constructed as part of our downtown plan. The sidewalk, so in this particular area, there will be the road and then a 7-foot wide sidewalk with landscaping, and with this project being under redevelopment because the plan was created with the existing Kentucky Fried Chicken, this particular property may need to be modified, whether there's room for landscaping or not room for landscaping. But so the township is constructing a sidewalk and boulevard through this area. So the sidewalk is would be installed by the township. There is a pedestrian connection from the restaurant out to the sidewalk. So just keep that in mind, that this is part of the downtown plan, and that's how we evaluated it with the staff report. So the trails plan, again, we felt is compatible. And with the downtown Beachmont plans, the idea of the downtown area is to create a center of the community for the area, starting at Asbury, running through 5 Mile Road. This is the downtown of the township. The plan calls for buildings to come closer to the roadway, whereas not traditional setback with parking in the front. It's to create a more pedestrian-friendly environment and also to slow traffic down, essentially. So we're trying to create that with the plan. There are several aspects of this plan that do meet that, but also several that do not meet the goals of the downtown plan. And again, the streetscape and the public improvements are being implemented this summer, later on this summer. The other project that is underway is consolidation of curb cuts and access management. And this is facilitated by ODOT. ODOT is doing that. That is their project this year. And that runs the length of Beachmont Avenue out to the Claremont County line. So essentially from 5 Mile Road out to the beach, to the Claremont County line. So the areas that we feel are compliant, the building, while it's not, the setbacks in that area are recommended to be 10 to 15 feet from the right-of-way. While this is set back about 30 feet, we felt that it does at least, it accommodates their drive-through, while ideally the building would be closer. This is one of those areas where ODOT is consolidating the curb cuts, and in order for them to swing the drive-through around, we feel that the building is as close as can be. It does have a front, and there are windows or front appearance on Beachmont Avenue. And then the parking is primarily on the side and the rear of the property. Other areas that they're identifying is they are identifying a future cross-access connection to the east and to the west. And with new development, it has been a trend to require all new development to at least provide the option of cross-access. If the property owners next door to them choose not to connect into them, at least that easement will be there for future development if or when the properties to the east and west are redeveloped. Items that we feel are not consistent with the downtown plan: the building does not really have the appearance of a 2-story building. It's really more of a story. So staff feels that it could at least have the appearance of a 2-story building. And this is a recommendation of our downtown plan to at least create more of that downtown area. Human-scale architectural elements to contribute to the unique pedestrian environment of the downtown area. There is no outdoor dining proposed, which we feel that is critical to help create that sense of open area and place for gathering. And then we feel that there should be an incorporation of more green area on the site. If you look at the aerial from the existing Kentucky Fried Chicken, not much extra green space is being proposed. Actually, it looks less. The drive aisles are wider than they need to be to meet zoning requirements, so staff feels that these could be possibly narrowed and add additional green space on both sides. The township is installing green in the front with the downtown plan where we can, but the other, no traffic islands are parking lot islands are proposed, and there really is landscaping up against the building, but beyond that, no additional landscaping is proposed. Design guidelines, again, we feel that the site planning, architecture, the site planning somewhat, except for that we just mentioned, the lighting plan is not consistent. The wall signage is consistent with design guidelines. The freestanding sign, however, is not consistent with the downtown plan or design guidelines. While the height is allowed per zoning, it is a non-conforming sign, and we do encourage that the sign come into conformance with the setback requirements. Also encourage the sign to be a monument-style sign, which has been installed by other businesses in the area with redevelopment. So staff recommends approval based off of the following, but then staff also recommends conditions, and these are the recommendations 1 through 6. 1, that the sign package be resubmitted because there are some inconsistencies with the facades in the wall signage package, and also inconsistencies on the site plan. It identified a monument style sign, and the sign package it identified a face change to the freestanding sign. So there are inconsistencies there. Staff also recommends that the freestanding sign be a monument style sign consistent with the downtown plan and other newer businesses and newer signs in the vicinity. A future cross-access connection or easement be recorded in favor to the properties to the east and west prior to final occupancy of the building. Not if the property owners adjacent are willing to connect, we encourage that, but if they're not willing to connect, at least provide the easement for when that opportunity becomes available. The lighting plan shall be resubmitted to be consistent with zoning requirements. The exit-only drive, number 4, the exit-only drive located in an easement to the adjacent property to the east, staff is recommending that that be removed if or when the property is redeveloped. This is on their property, and this would aid in the consolidation of curb cuts on Beachmont Avenue, which is a component of our Beachmont corridor plan, and it's also a component of what ODOT is trying to do. We're not encouraging that now with the current owner, but when or if the property is redeveloped. The parking area, especially in the back, should be restriped to allow for 9 by 19. Also, a loading space shall be identified. Bicycle parking shall be provided, and then the at least the one space, maybe 2, as you drive in, needs to be at least 30 feet. So really, the parking lot, we are encourage you to, if you approve it, to place a condition that come into compliance. And then number 6, no information was provided on the dumpster enclosure, so we recommend that the dumpster enclosure should be constructed materials to match the building. Do you have any questions?
We'll start at this end with Commissioner Eliff.
Thank you very much.
Questions for staff?
Yeah, just a couple. So talking about that, so I see in the staff recommendations we kind of let go of the additional green space. Did you talk with the applicant? Is there actually room on that site? I got the impression they don't really have much room for anything except the circulation they want. Is there some SketchUp or something that shows, yeah, it'd be easy to put something here, or are we just talking very narrow bands that might have, survivability problems anyway?
We did not fully vet that out with the applicant. We sent an email about a month ago and then sent an email more recently before the meeting. So we have not fully vetted it, but I think it should be used for discussion with the applicant.
Thank you. And then the parking spaces on the back side, it sounds like they're a little bit on the small side. Again, was there, our standard's 9 by 19, as you mentioned, Paul? But what are the size of those ones back there? They do
They
look a
vary.
little narrow.
And again, they're showing reusing the existing spaces that are there, and they vary. These are larger, I'm sorry, maybe it's the other way around, but they're not consistent as you go from east to west. So some are short by about 2 feet, and some are longer.
And they're short of parking space now, but that's consistent with what the code actually desires. Is there room to reconfigure that, or is that one of the things that you asked about, but you never saw additional, revisions?
Right.
Okay. And
We did so the application was made, we did our site plan review after the application was submitted, and our findings are in the staff report. But we haven't necessarily seen a revised plan to see if it can be addressed.
Commissioner Reagan?
Yes, I just have a couple questions. So for, on this type of property, how high would a monument-style sign be? Or what's the maximum height?
Well, the maximum height for any freestanding signage is 15 feet. Again, with a monument-style sign, the square footage is based, if the sign is over 6 feet tall, we include the base in that calculation.
Right.
If it's under 6 feet, we do not include the base as part of the calculation. So the overall square footage of a freestanding sign is based off of the frontage, which my site plan is out in the audience. I might need it back. Oh, hold on, it's on here. Sorry, I have another copy. Yes, I do, thank you. So 130 feet is the frontage, so they could have half of that. This total area of the sign.
65.
Okay. And also, just one last question. So with the proposed condition of recording an easement with the properties to the east and west?
Yes.
What would you want the scope of that easement to be? Just for customers to go between the properties, or larger vehicles, or kind of what was your idea with that?
So this is a product out of our Beachmont Corridor Plan, which was developed in the late 90s, but it was to provide cross-access between properties to allow for traffic to get to a signalized intersection. In this particular area, Valvoline, Capples, and Frisch's are connected via parking lot connections. So essentially, you could get over to the signal at Wolf Angle through
Right.
parking lot connections, or if you just wanted to go from Capples to Frisch's, or from, business to business. So what has been implemented with other redevelopment on Beachmont Avenue is an easement, and as properties develop, because it's not mandated, but as properties redeveloped, to allow for future connections to, in this case, it would be a parking lot connection from the property to the east or the west for access for vehicles, not specific.
Okay, so just be for customers, or could it even include like delivery trucks, or just to keep it off
Yes,
of Beachmont?
it's not consistent, yes. I mean, it's not restrictive to, customers, or
Okay.
it's just cross-access.
Okay. That's all.
Okay. I'm going to have questions about the same thing, but we'll go on to Commissioner Boone.
I have some comments that might lead to a question. I feel like we're missing a golden opportunity in our downtown area here to have the building closer to the road. And then also with the egress and ingress, I understand the need to, bring that down to one point of entry and exit. But I'm curious as to why we couldn't, in light of what you just talked about with the plan over to Wolf Angle, could we reroute the exiting traffic over to Wolf Angle so we wouldn't have to have that little drive-through area in front of the building, which would allow us to pull that building out closer to the street?
Ideally, yes. And we have, I think we might have some property owners to talk about that here tonight also.
Okay.
The township's approach to cross-access has always been voluntary with existing businesses. It typically has been a condition with approval of new construction, new development going in. So with both of the existing properties on both sides, Frisch's and the multi-tenant building to the east, it requires consent of those property owners to allow for that cross-access. And the township doesn't necessarily have that consent or an agreement to allow for that to happen. So in lieu of that, what we're suggesting is that the current property, Tim Hortons or Kentucky Fried Chicken, if it's approved with that condition, they allow for access, easement access, when or if those other properties develop.
Right.
This is similar to what happened with the shopping center there where Izzy's and First Watch is.
Right.
They were required when or if Buddy Rogers was to develop, and same with Christ Ambulatory Center, that they tie in, which that property did tie in with the medical office building in the back behind McDonald's. And now with the Buddy Rogers being redeveloped into a bank, there will now be a cross-access connection. Same thing with the, actually the property directly across the street with FedEx and what used to be Kunkel's. When the property next door to it redeveloped, the old bowling alley redeveloped, they were required to allow for cross-access if that property owner wanted to go through there, and that happened. So now you can get from Asbury over to at least through the Festival Market Shopping Center from the other direction. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
I mean, this is a piecemeal approach, and the township actually did meet with the property owners. They're here. But they just chose not to tie in at this point in time.
There are just so many points of entry there along, and it's dangerous, you know, and it's a spot, and I know from personal experience, my wife hit a bicyclist who was traveling illegally, passing stopped traffic, and a lot right in front of Frisch's there. And there's so many, you know, to exit, especially to try to exit out of this development to go eastbound, it's going to be very difficult and dangerous. And I just, I wish it seems like there could be a simple answer to route that traffic exiting Tim Hortons right over to Wolf Angle. And then also, it brings about the ability to pull that building forward, which is a stated goal of ours. And also, I'd like to see the two-story facade as well that you've referenced. And I don't know if I didn't see it under the staff recommendations, but you did reference it. So I don't know if that's something that's been considered or could be considered. So I guess that's all I have for now.
Okay.
For you.
I have the same issues that the commissioners have brought up on the curb cuts. When you're going, I understand we're trying to eliminate them, but trying to go left or eastbound out of here seems to be problematic, and it'd be problematic for the people that get queued up behind a person trying to go left versus those trying to go right, because there's only one out. Is that correct on the Beachmont?
Correct.
And I know we're limited, and when you talk about the cross-access, I think of cross-access like what you see at Target and Staples, where that road is dedicated. Here you have cross-access. There's actually a curb on the east side of this, like an 8-inch curb. When you go from where the auto repair and the lounge going into the KFC, you can't do that today unless you have a certain type of vehicle. And similarly, when you go on the other side, you're actually trying to cross-access. You're cutting through a parking lot that is lined for parking spots. So if someone at Frisch's is parked there, there's not cross-access because there's nothing dedicated. Is that correct?
Well, and just to clarify, they're showing it on their plan as future cross-access, but that number 10 there would be a concrete curb. So they're not allowing for cross-access until the property owners.
So they're not going to take out the curb.
Correct. Curb is
But on the west side, there are no curbs, but you could traverse through parking lots, through Frisch's, Cappell's, into the Valvoline.
Frisch's and Cappell's agreed, once Valvoline was constructed, to restripe their parking lots to tie in. They saw
Okay.
the benefits of that to tie in. And so that was something voluntarily on their part to do.
Okay. And I understand the lighting and the parking, the signage, we have issues now. I guess at this point, I'd like to, bring up the applicant. And you gentlemen have both been sworn in. Please state your name and your address and your affiliation.
Yes, good evening. My name is Greg Dale. I'm with McBride Dale Clarion here on behalf of Tim Hortons. I'm at 5721 Dragon Way. With me today is Marty Rittenhouse with QSR7, who are the developers for Tim Hortons.
Yeah, sure. Marty Rittenhouse, I'm the real estate development manager for QSR7, who's the independent area developer of Tim Hortons. We're the tenant in this instance.
Okay. Do you have anything to add to what staff has offered, or you?
Sure, I can try to address what we've heard. So first of all, with regard to the conditions that have been proposed by staff, should the commission choose to approve this with those conditions, we're fine with all of those conditions, with one exception and one refinement. The one exception has to do with the sign. And while we appreciate staff's belief that a monument sign would better pursue the objectives of the downtown plan, we do think that there are some unique conditions here that would merit consideration of the proposal, which is to reuse and relocate the existing sign. So the existing pylon sign is actually it would be relocated to where the closed access would be. So what I'd like to do, if I could, is to show you a couple of photographs of the site conditions.
Does staff have this electronically that they can put up on the big screen for everyone?
No, I don't think they do. But I have some extra copies here if anybody would like to see them. So the two photos are essentially the same. It's just that one is a closer up shot. So the first photo shows the westbound traffic, westbound approach. And one of the challenges that we have with this site is frankly just a visibility issue associated with the signage. So both photographs show the same thing. The second one is just slightly closer in. So if you look to the right of the truck that has the arm sticking up, you can see the red. That's the Frisch's sign. And it's hard to see because the frame of the current sign is empty, but you can barely make out that sign. The concern is that a monument sign simply wouldn't be visible with that westbound approach. In particular, there's a lot of things already on the ground. There are other ground signs. Cars can park in front. And the western approach, if you can appreciate the Tim Horton business model, the western approach is essentially their morning inbound approach, and they rely very heavily upon that morning traffic. And so the concern is that that monument sign simply wouldn't be visible, and that's why we're proposing to reuse the existing sign, relocate it slightly to the west. Like I say, you can see on that photograph on the board there where that is proposed to be, which is where the current driveway is now. So we would respectfully request that the proposal as submitted in terms of the reuse of that sign be approved. The other condition that I simply want to comment on is the condition about the parking. And we are able to redesign the lot. We are able to make sure that all the stalls meet the requirements. What we would propose is that the two spaces that are at the very front of the site there be removed. First of all, there's potential backing out into Beachmont Avenue concerns. But what that would allow us to do is to add some additional green space there, and we would open up a little bit of space in the rear to add some additional green space. That would make us 2 parking spaces short of the code requirements for spaces, but given the heavy reliance on this use to drive-through traffic, which is about 80% of the business's drive-through traffic, we think that's reasonable. So just a couple of other comments. The one thing that was, Mr. Elliff, I think you asked about the green space. We're agreeing, the applicant is agreeing to that easement in the rear. That's about between 10 and 15% of the site. That's a substantial amount of property on a piece of property that's only 0.7 acres to begin with. So, that helps create some real constraints in terms of what can be done with the site. Certainly losing the access point as ODOT has required, making it necessary to have that drive-through swing in front of the building. I understand the desire to get that building as close to Beachmont Avenue as is possible, but I think we've done as much as we can do given that requirement. So I guess with that, I would just open it up to any other questions that you have. Like I say, if we could ask for relief on that condition related to the monument sign and allow us to reuse the existing sign, and with that one clarification in terms of the parking being 2 spaces short, as that could be a part of the condition, then we're fine with the conditions that staff has laid them out.
Okay. Commissioner Eliff, questions for the applicant?
Yes, a couple. So you guys are okay with the conditions except for the sign. What about the loading space? I was trying to figure out what's the dimensions of that and where would you put that?
Good question.
We're actually working through I believe it's in the back of the property.
Well, it's not that big a deal. It's just so you think it'll work. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, if you look on the existing plan there, it's effectively where that darker space is, where those 2 parking spaces go away.
All right.
To the right, on the east side of the site.
Okay. And with this cross-access easement, which I think is really commendable that you guys are on board with that, and it's kind of weird situation. Is there some property rights issues going on here? Because if you put that easement in place and that curb, the physical barrier curbs on your property, you could just saw cut it and knock it out, couldn't you?
Right. I think, though, for a cross-access easement to be functional the way the township desires it, is though properties on both sides would have to agree to this. So it's not like we can just cut the curb out and have people start to drive through the adjacent property. They would have to agree to that. It's
kind of like Mr. Stewart was pointing out, that on the going the other way, I guess there's not a physical barrier, but there's striping there. Is that right?
On Frisch's property.
Yeah.
Yes. So again, those owners would have to cooperate with the restriping of that, which our client's fine with, but it would require those adjacent property owners to be a part of that.
And I guess I'll ask this to Mr. Rittenhouse. The sign. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on Beachmont Avenue for sure, but I mean, the traffic you'll capture for like the morning or whatever.
Sure.
It's not going to take them very long to learn where you are and where your access points are and stuff like that, is it?
To that point, we are very much a convenience play, more so than a consistency play. So we're super excited to be a part of Anderson Township and really want to be a part of that community. But the customer that doesn't know we exist and maybe only goes down Beachmont, our ability to capture them diminishes substantially without being visible. I mean, it's such an impulse convenience play.
Yeah. And what percentage of traffic would that be? 5%?
So that
less?
Percentage of what?
percentage
of traffic.
He mentioned that it's important because for the unfamiliar traveler along Beachmont Avenue, at probably peak hours, right? The breakfast, coffee, and donuts type of thing?
Yep.
Be
Yeah,
extremely
6
low
and 10.
percentage, would it not?
Right, I think to that point, a lot of people don't actually know what a Tim Hortons is.
Right, but that's
new
not the-
brand of Cincinnati, and I don't know the exact percentage of the traffic that would be captured by the specific signage, but I can provide a case study as example of something that we've experienced already with 2 separate locations, one with AM signage, one without. Exact same building, one with AM signage and one without. The one without actually has about half of the sales.
But that's no signage at all, though, right?
No signage at all, but visibility is such such a imperative option for us because of, again, being the convenience play. And I can, the powers that be at my company have told me that if the signage doesn't exist for us, then it doesn't necessarily become a viable site for it. I mean, it truly is imperative to our success to be visible, to have people be able to make that turn and go into our site. And being as agreeable as we were to the cross-access easement and moving our site a little bit further back than maybe what we would like, we're certainly hoping that the township recognizes that as well.
I thought you moved it back so you could accommodate your drive-through aisle across the front.
Well, that's because of the access easement. We would,
The access
and
easement's
because
across
of the
the-
ODOT closure of the.
But
so
that's ODOT, right?
The conditions of the entire site plan were that one access was closing and then that the easement would be
Yeah,
put in
it's a little
place. That
tough.
was
In other words, if
certainly the preference of the town.
if ODOT was not requiring the closure of that, it wouldn't have to swing around in front and the building could be closer, is the point. The other point that I would just like to make to the signs, and it doesn't directly respond to your question, but I think it's just important to keep in mind, and that is that the existing sign that they're proposing to reuse is substantially smaller than signs on either side, either the Frisch's signs or the sign for the business center to the immediate east of it. And it is compliant from a height perspective with the code.
That's true.
One other quick point out on the sign, and I can drop the comment there, but I do see it as not only just a visibility thing, but in some instances I can see it as a safety concern, being able to identify the Tim Hortons, slow, make a turn in traffic, because I know we've all been on Beachmont and experienced that. I really do see it as a concern for anyone pulling into our site to be able to see it, make a traffic movement to get into the right lane if they're in the center lane or if they're in the secondary lane, to move over in time, because otherwise you're almost past the site by the time you see it. And as we all know, it's quite a wall of traffic to even change one lane on Beachmont.
But there would be cross-access potential if they missed that and drove in through Frisch's, right?
Potentially when that arose, but there would be certainly a period of time where that didn't exist.
And again, that's in that case would be up to Frisch's, it'd be up to the adjacent property owners.
Yep.
We can't stand here and say that, represent what they would agree to.
You're right.
Okay, anything else? Commissioner Reagan?
Yes, I just had a couple questions. With a musical interlude, it seems.
Oh, hey. Did you lose something? Yeah, I lost the thumb drive earlier when I was setting up. Oh, thought maybe you were looking for your ghost.
That happens in this building.
I've never happened during a meeting, sorry about that.
Well, now that we've had a musical interlude,
Make it good.
yes. So my question was, what kind of environmentally sustainable practices do you incorporate into construction methods for Tim Hortons?
we do, I don't know the specifics of the building materials or the environmental. I mean, we're certainly not LEED certified buildings if that's the.
But do you do something moving toward that area when you build a new Tim Hortons? It doesn't have to be like, I'm not talking about LEED certification or anything,
Sure.
or.
I would think that we would try to be efficient with building materials. I don't know the specifics off the top of my head. Wasn't truly prepared for the question, so I apologize.
Oh, you're fine.
Happy to get that answer back to you at some point if you like. On further review, I mean, I just don't know the answer to that.
Okay. And then the other question was, so I know that the proposal here has one ingress and egress, and one of you stated earlier that about 80% of the business you imagine will be drive-through, most of that in the morning with people going westbound downtown for work. With one ingress and egress, do you think that that will be enough with, the cars lining up? Especially in the first few weeks that it's open. I remember when when Krispy Kreme opened, it was backed up on Beachmont for the first few weeks. Do you foresee traffic issues like this with one ingress and egress?
So with the width of that front aisle, it's about 15, give or take 15 feet. So we do see the ability for traffic to exit and get out. I don't foresee a substantial traffic issue from being able to exit. I mean, a lot of it we've got plenty of stacking along the east side of the building. Even if there were a point where they were stacking up, there would be substantial space for any cars to get in there and eventually get out as well. Especially with one thing we know, and we've spent a significant amount of time just kind of sitting on the site watching traffic patterns. There is a break caused by the light that's a little further to the east, which really allows for flow of traffic. So if there were a slowdown, it would be pretty minimal, would be our thought. We certainly analyzed that.
And would you say that the proposed green space that you're including with the site is consistent with or more or less than the average we'd see at another Tim Hortons location? I don't know where the nearest one is actually, but would you say it's in line or more or less?
I would think it's actually a little bit more from what I've seen.
Okay.
The closest locations are Coleraine and Erlanger.
Okay.
Yep.
That's it.
All right.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Boone?
Just a couple things here. As far as the sign issue goes, yeah, I can kind of see both sides here. I'm assuming that your typical customer may, slip in for a cup of coffee kind of on impulse. And if they don't see the sign, they may know you're there, but they just drive right on by, even though they've driven by every day of their lives, forever. So I kind of understand that. I also share some concerns about if we have a monumental style sign, again, pulling in and out, is that going to create any kind of blockage for views? And I'm not sure exactly where that monumental sign would be.
It's in the corner of that.
Sorry.
Okay, gotcha.
Mute their mics and the screen goes off. So
No
we're
worries.
going to try it again and just keep your fingers crossed.
Yeah, would that be any kind of visibility concern, pulling in and out?
It's a good question. Honestly, I don't know that that's been looked at because there wasn't a monument sign proposed. But that's it.
And I can answer that. Our setback requirements are out of that blocking the site. So
Okay.
if it's actually at an intersection, it's required to be set back a little bit farther out of the site distance triangle. And the other thing to keep in mind here is that lanes are getting more narrow, and actually where you're pulling out is going to be farther out than what you saw in the picture presented for the
Okay.
signs. So there actually will be better sight distance now with the implementation of the downtown plan, because there will be a wider sidewalk there, and where you're actually pulling out into the lane of travel is farther out.
Will ODOT be reducing the speed in that section?
No.
Okay.
As far as the two-story facade, which is something I'm guessing you're not too excited about, is that something that could be considered?
I guess I don't fully understand what you envision that the end result to be. I think there are certainly.
If I could take a shot at that. So first of all, I think keeping in mind that this is a narrow site, I'm not going to try to speculate about what the thinking was behind those guidelines, but typically when you see communities try to create that sense of more than one story, they're trying to get at this issue of verticality to kind of help create that street presence. And again, given that we're on a very narrow site to begin with, I would make the argument that the architectural facade that you see here is trying to create that sense of verticality. And again, I know it's not perfect from a downtown design perspective. What we are dealing with a very small lot that has had a fast food restaurant on it that's in between another restaurant. You know, and just given the context, I would suggest that the human scale, the verticality that's designed to be achieved with those guidelines is met here. Otherwise, if you picture that and you try to picture another story stacked on that just for appearance, it wouldn't be used. It would just be the appearance. I just don't know that from an architectural and urban design perspective that advances the objectives as well as this does.
One other thing. I'm still struggling with the idea that the building's sitting back farther than we'd like, and I know you're struggling with that too, so it's not really, I'm not really trying to pick on you guys over this. But would you agree to any kind of situation where if and when all the parties agree that there would be that your customers could come through the other lots there over to Wolf Angle, would you agree then to turn that lane into an outdoor seating area, which would bring the restaurant closer to the road at some point in the future? And Paul, I don't know if that's...
I don't know how that's possible, because they wouldn't be able to exit the drive-through.
Well, if you could exit into the...
Drive-through's the furthest south point of the plan. So they're doing this maneuver, even if, I mean, they'd have to circulate the building somehow, even to get back up to here.
Right. You get the loop, double loop. Well, if there was no blockade or anything between Frisch's and I mean, because we're talking about a future where, you know, this wouldn't all happen until Frisch's was redeveloped, which would also be closer to the street. So there may be a way to, you know, to get your vehicles exiting to just kind of turn around and go right back to that, I guess, secondary road.
The drive-through is occurring here, the pickup is occurring here.
Correct.
And so they'd have to get from here back around.
Yeah, without doing a 180-degree turn, which I don't think there's room at the end of the building for, I just don't know how they would, I don't know if that's realistic to expect someone to do that.
Okay. All right. And the exit lane to the east is staying for now? That's, I guess, part of the property, and that's staying? So that, and I think that's a real safety concern, because now you're going to have two exit lanes literally right next to each other with an entrance, you're going to have a car turning in, but yet you can have cars exiting on both sides of where that car's turning in.
In our initial undertaking, we did approach the property owner to the east in an effort to keep the existing drive aisle, so the two lanes on the west and then the single lane on the east. But it would have required her to close that exit, which she would have.
And I just think that's more dangerous than having the second point that currently exists, where you enter on the one side and exit on the other. So I think ODOT might be a bit short-sighted in this, because we could bring the building up front like we wanted. You wouldn't have the huge safety concern, I think, that's going to be created here by having an exit, entrance, exit lane all right together. That seems pretty odd to me, particularly in that area.
And this was certainly the second iteration of our plan. To
Sure.
incorporate that, but obviously we wouldn't be able to do it without participation of other parties.
Right.
Good. Anything else?
Nope.
Okay. I have some questions. On the design, on the pictures, it looked like the entrance was in front, but actually it's on the east side. Is there a entrance on the west side for pedestrian, for people to park and come in? Or is it just enter on one side of the building?
Entrances are on one side of the building, which would be the east side.
Okay.
This particular instance, that's our Coleraine location.
Okay.
They required an entrance on the front of the building.
On the outdoor eating that staff brought up, was it, did you look at behind the restaurant where the landscaping is, where cars are queuing to come around as an option for outdoor eating?
We did. There's certainly landscaping there. I don't know if you want to eat out there, so it might be in fact wasted space. But
I'm not, I've been to Tim Hortons, but I haven't been to one. I'm not familiar enough to know the indoor-outdoor mix.
yeah.
And if I remember correctly, Paul, the idea of the outdoor seating is intended to be more the seating in the front, on the street
The
front.
seating in the front, similar to other restaurants up and down Beach
Create
Road.
that pedestrian-friendly frontage.
Correct.
So with the way it's configured with the drive-through, that would not be an option. On the queuing, I'm sorry.
And I think that was staff's recommendation still. It didn't, not as a recommended condition, but earlier in the staff report, is there a way to put some outdoor seating area in the front, just like Krispy Kreme did with their drive-through in the front?
Okay, thank you. With the queuing for the drive-through, when a car comes through, and I, just from personal experience, having worked at a drive-through years ago, some orders aren't ready to be processed, and rather than back everyone up, they ask the people to pull aside, and they'll run something out to them. Where does that happen here?
I think there is space to the front. There's about 15 feet. That's about three car widths. So there's still ability in the front for someone to pull around.
They would just pull forward from the window, and people would pull around them?
That's certainly an opportunity, or the opportunity exists for that to happen out in the front of the building, toward the south end of the property. That's about a 15-foot wide drive.
Does that happen with this sort of use, though? I mean, I understand what you're saying for like a
McDonald's was...
or something where
Sure.
the food's not ready.
I haven't seen it personally happen at our two locations. I
Okay.
would say that it doesn't, because I've certainly experienced that
All right.
before as well.
What are the hours of operations for the Tim Hortons?
Typically over 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. And then there's opportunity for 24-hour service, but realistically, people are out of the restaurant for maybe 4 or 5 hours because the baking staff shows up 3:30 or 4 to start prep for the day.
Are deliveries limited to certain hours because of...
Typically, there are, I think there are either 1 or 2 deliveries a week. I'm not quite sure what time they come. I know they come on Wednesday and then Sunday if necessary.
Is there issues with a truck delivering, getting in and out of the property?
No, they can provide a very, we've had to do that at our earlier location where they
Okay.
provide a shorter truck so that it would fit because of the narrowness of the lot.
Okay. And on the parking, and if you're already short spaces, how many employees and how many employees take up parking spots that would be for customers? If you're already down 2, where do the employees park and how many spaces are they taking up?
Sure, I would think it's usually staff of maybe 6 to 10, so you might be able to easily have them all in the back and then have your customer have a shorter walk to the eastern doors.
Okay. Did anything else come up as we were talking.
Can I ask Paul one more question on the sign, Paul?
Yes.
So if it was still Kentucky Fried Chicken today, they could come in and just get a face change over the counter
Correct.
for that sign? And could they just come in over the counter and say, we want to come into compliance and move the sign back?
Yes.
And they could. But is it because this is a brand-new business and it's in the PUD realm?
Correct.
That we have an opportunity to discuss the sign?
Yes.
But we don't necessarily, our code doesn't necessarily require monument signs.
The code does not require monument signs, however, all of our plans for this particular neighborhood, which is the downtown area, encourage lower monument style
Right,
signs.
and we've seen those.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a plan goal. Got it. Okay, thanks.
So I guess maybe stated another way, our intent is as people come in and redevelop, we put them in compliance with our new zoning for signage in this area.
The zoning does allow for pole signs. So the sign that's there is a compliant sign because it's no taller than 15 feet height-wise. It's non-conforming because of the setback to the edge of the pavement.
Correct.
So with a non-conforming sign, you can change the face of the non-conforming sign, but any other improvements that would be more than 50% of the value of the sign would require the sign to come into compliance.
Okay.
The idea with the PUDs and the review of PUDs is to evaluate the plan against the adopted plans for this particular neighborhood
Okay.
and their recommendations.
Thanks for clarification.
I've got a question for Paul.
Can we excuse the applicant then at this point? Okay, good.
And we
Thanks.
do have other members of the...
I know we're going to do the opposition in a second, but you want to go back to Paul first?
Does ODOT have us in a stranglehold on this? I mean, do we have to do this single point of entry and egress that pushes the building back against our plan, against our downtown plan, and really, I think is, just seems less safe?
Well, ODOT has been in conversation and in partnership with the township with all of our pre-meetings with Tim Hortons. ODOT has been at the table and has reviewed their plans. It's a difficult site because currently there are 3 curb cuts, one in, one out, and then the exit with next door, which is in an easement for another property that's not. So they are looking at the entire corridor. That is why they're doing the corridor implementation plan. I wouldn't say it's I think they're open for discussions to make sure, because they want to make sure that it's a good plan as well. So no, I wouldn't say that, again, they've been in a partnership with us to try to come up with the best possible plans. I think they agree it's not the best plan either. I think Tim Hortons agrees it's not the best plan either. But that's the difficulty with this type of redevelopment.
Sure. Okay. All right. Anyone else want to speak in support of the applicant? Okay, then we'll open it up to opposition. Please come forward and state your name and your address.
It's not an opposition. My name is Joyce Buelsing. I have Buelsing LLC right next to proposed Horton. I've got a couple.
Are you on the, I'm sorry, are you on the east side or west side?
East.
Okay.
Keep looking at this. I don't know if you realize how many...
Please address the commission, not the applicant. Sorry.
How many trucks go behind there? If that's going to be open from there over to Wolf Angle, there's going to be some trucks going that way instead of trying, it amazes me how they can turn around in that parking lot behind my building. Okay, if there is a curb cut so that traffic can come to the east, it's not getting you to a traffic light. It's congesting my area and Tom, who is La Rosa. It would just mess that up and eliminate quite a bit of parking for me. and Tom, Friday nights is really full and busy. I don't see where you're going to get an advantage out of that. I really don't. I mean, all these big semis would be going through Hortons, Frisch's, Capples, all the way to Wolfangle, rather than trying to turn out of our driveway, or Billy Tom's driveway. This side right here where I have this easement,
Can you put up the picture and use your, so we all can see where she's pointing?
yeah, the easement right inside that red border, yes, that's it. The only people that use that are the cars, no trucks or anything. And I really think the cars could come out the other way, more to the east between Tom and I. The cars would use that, and I believe the trucks, if that were cut through, would really wipe out a lot of our parking, and it would be a nuisance to all the neighbors down the line to Wolfangle. Are you following what I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay. It's just a proposal. I'm at a disadvantage. My husband lined all this up. He's been gone for like 17 years now. And I know there is an easement there. I think it would be to their advantage, other than I would lose parking in the back.
Okay.
So, you know what I'm saying?
Sure. Does anyone in the commission have
Yes.
a question? I'm sorry, would you like to speak? When we have you both speak, and then we'll direct the question to one or both. So state your name.
Tom Facito, own the property is 7756 Beachmont, Tate's Buxton Bakery, and on Roses, and 2 other tenants. What Joyce is saying in regards to the easement, first of all, I want to say that we are not opposed to Tim Hortons per se as Tim Hortons. We're opposed to some of the issues it's creating on some of our properties.
Sure, understood.
It's already an issue to exit because we have the lounge, which is on Joyce's property, and she has some other tenants as well that have vehicles, and especially the lounge that their happy hours like 4 to 7, so they're kind of end at 7. The Roses is busy at that time. So to try and make an exit, heading east out of that property that time of day is difficult now. To put more traffic on top of that, I think creates even some other issues. It definitely we would lose parking, which is already critical. We're already losing parking in front. Road Dock has taken that property for the sidewalks. So, we become nervous. I become nervous in the parking situation, and I don't know if we would meet criteria if we lost additional parking. And as I was sitting, I'm thinking, I don't even know if there's some sort of I haven't even discussed it with Joyce, I just brainstorming some sort of idea of is there such a thing as a temporary hourly easement or something like that? I don't have a clue, I don't know.
Yeah.
So, just brainstorming if their peak is 6 a.m., fine. I don't think there's much issue for any of us at that time in the morning, I have a little conflict. I don't have a conflict, let me rephrase it. Buxton Bakery may have a conflict with Tim Hortons, but that's just cost of doing business.
Sure.
We have plenty of pizza places in Anderson Township, and Rose been there for 42 years, and, it just goes on. You compete, and so, but, I don't know if some type of easement can be done or not, but I think what Joyce is saying that, very few cars use that. I think maybe we just need to brainstorm a little bit better. I don't think we're opposed. We would like to do what would help, but would help everybody.
Too much sacrifice.
Yeah, without us having to give up
Okay.
It's not, we're not,
All right.
correct me if I'm wrong, but we're not opposed to the idea of trying to, something to be, you know, creative and try and do something that works for everyone.
Sure. Okay, anyone on the, Commissioner Reagan?
So just to clarify, your ideal situation would be, what would your ideal situation be regarding the easements? Would it be to just have a limited easement that would just only apply to the situation between your properties and Tim Hortons? Or would it be no easement, or just, what would your ideal situation be here?
Well, I hesitate to say that really right now. You know, without, you know, having representation here telling us what is best to do. So, I mean, I know in my mind kind of what I think, but I don't know if that's makes good business sense or not, so.
Okay.
Is that fair to answer it that way? I'm sorry. I'm not trying to put...
No, but I mean, you don't want to commit to if you don't,
I just
100% so.
don't know positively, and I'd be committing to something that I may regret down the road. So
Okay.
I'm just trying to clarify things here. So the issue comes down to the additional traffic that would come onto your properties with this easement on the east side, with customers and deliveries coming through. Is that the issue, what it comes down to?
That's part of it.
Okay.
Then the other part could be the loss of parking.
Okay.
See, I own the lion's share of the egress there on the La Rosa side. Joyce's is really just on the, from that telephone pole, I don't know if you have that, can put that up or not, but it's on from that telephone pole, it cuts through those parking spots there. But the actual egress area is pretty much on my property.
Right.
And Joyce and I, over the years, do we have any on the other side of Joyce's building there? No, okay.
Is that, I frequent all of these places on a regular basis, and I'm having trouble visualizing. Yeah.
You know where the lounge is?
I know where the lounge is. I'm pretty familiar with La Rosa's and
Okay, if you're
Buskin's.
coming in, you would come in La Rosa's lot.
This helps.
Or Buskin's lot, okay? And you make a left behind Joyce's building there, and you go to the lounge, you park back there.
And then La Rosa's is just to the east.
Well, you have Buskin, yeah.
Buskin, La Rosa, gotcha.
Yes.
Okay.
But if you look at where Buskin's is on this end of that center, and that whole lot where you come in, there you make, then you make a left behind Joyce's property.
Gotcha.
We share that parking, okay?
Okay.
We've done that for many years.
Yeah.
You know.
How'd that come about? If you know, or what's maybe
Actually,
preceded you
that
guys?
building that Joyce owns today, many years ago, used to be Virginia Bakery and apartments upstairs and so on and so forth.
Actually, the two-story was Doug's Glass.
Well, that was
Okay.
after Virginia Bakery. Doug Duddy, was it? Don Duddy, I think it was. They bought that. There was Doug's Glass, as Joyce says. And there were apartments there. And Jerry Jones has been there for decades.
Okay.
So my question was, how is it you all have shared access on that one side?
Just together on, I mean, the lounge needed parking, we needed parking. And actually, we had an old building there, it was called Williams Grocery years ago. It was torn down, we tore that down in 1985, redid that site, and I built the little center back then.
So you have an agreement, you share parking, but there's no designated, this is La Rosa's only, this is Buskin's only, this is the lounge only?
We share.
Okay.
We share back and forth. Lounge parks on ours, we park on, Joyce's back and forth.
Okay, and then question for staff then. With that concrete berm that's there now, and with the easement, there's no plans to take that out in the short term? It'd be long term when you negotiated or when it became open on either side?
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct.
So, and from my understanding, I guess, if the losing of parking spaces, they still would be, even if it came out, they still would be striped and marked, and it's not a dedicated cross area?
We did an analysis, actually Ryan, our co-op, helped do this. I believe it was about 2 spaces that would be lost, potentially 3.
If you decide to designate it or
Wait a minute, I got it.
dedicated cross easement.
Right, because I know there are spaces coming off of the building in the back, but this would allow to tie in directly to your existing drive aisle.
There are no parking places directly up against the warehouse in the back. If you put an opening and egress across there, if you look at that picture, it would eliminate a lot of the parking places that are designated on my property, which I have been told all along, I have to have so many per tenant. I would not be in regulation that way.
Well, I think it takes out that road, like Joyce is talking about, straight across.
We did a couple of analysis where it would eliminate about 2 or 3 total. It may require some restriping of the parking spaces, but you could get in. I guess, and maybe we need to have the applicant come back up, but I think that Tim Hortons is agreeing to allowing for cross-access when or if the neighbors could agree. And so
Sure. That's
Just to be clear, Tim Hortons has agreed to this at the township's request. But if the property owners don't want that traffic coming through their property, it's their property. They would have to agree to that. So we're not here to urge the property owners to agree or not to agree. It's there because of the township's request.
Okay.
You can't just open it up and remove spaces. The property owners will have to agree to it.
All right, well, we have, obviously we have some unknowns here, so I'm going to close the question session. And I'd like to open up just to the commissioners.
Mr. Chair, you may want to see if the applicant wanted to rebut.
I'm sorry. Did you want to, anything that Mrs. Bielson or Mr. Facido said?
No.
Okay. Now I will close. Thank you, Paul. All right, so open up to just general discussion amongst us.
Yeah, maybe I'm misunderstanding some things, but it seems like the concerns that we are having right now don't really go into effect unless the properties are someday redeveloped, right? If something changes.
I'm sorry, this is just for the commission, I'm sorry. Thank you.
So, can we leave? Is that what you're saying?
You're welcome to stay, you're welcome to leave, but you're more than welcome to stay.
So, if I may, with the adoption of our Beachmont Corridor Plan back in the 90s, it was the township's desire to not force cross connections on business owners. Unlike some other communities where, a median is put up in the middle of the road and they force those businesses to tie into each other. So it's always been the township's approach to work with existing property owners to tie properties together to signalize intersection, whether that is a dedicated access way or through just parking lot connections.
Right.
And your example of Target, and that's a dedicated pathway. Frisch's Valvoline Capitals is an example of a parking lot connection. So regardless, the idea is to, in an effort to consolidate curb cuts on Beachmont Avenue, it helps to get from one property to another without actually having to get back on the road, or it also just helps to eliminate conflicting ingresses and egresses. When a property redevelops, one way to implement that corridor plan is to place a condition, especially if it's a PUD, that the property that's in question allows for the tie-in if or when those properties. And the township has made great strides and great efforts to work with existing property owners, but again, it has to be voluntary and they have to agree to it. We have worked with these property owners extensively, and I think this summed up those discussions very well.
Great.
There were concerns, and some of those concerns couldn't be overcome where they voluntarily agreed to an easement. So,
Yeah, I mean, historically, I remember the McDonald's not allowing the cut-through theirs to get to the light from the festival, is it festival shopping?
yes.
So they had to go out to Asbury.
Yes.
So.
Correct.
Understand that. And just by design, I think people going eastbound through Tim Hortons would cause a trouble just based on the flow of traffic. So it's sort of tangential that if the other property owner doesn't want it, then it doesn't happen anyway. So it shouldn't, I don't think it should affect our discussions about Tim Hortons necessarily, their ability to accept or not accept the other property owners. That's just my feeling.
I agree.
I mean, we can always record, they can always record the easement, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be opened until the adjoining properties are redeveloped. So I think it's just perfectly fine in this case. We could condition with the easements and they'd be recorded with this piece of property. But then once the adjoining pieces of property are redeveloped or sold, or they do something that would trigger the PUD process, that's when we would be able to have more discussion about opening that up definitively. But I think it's almost like just having it there for when it is more advantageous to make it available. That's what it sounds like?
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I think we all understand this is just kind of a side discussion that doesn't really apply to us. I will just add, I guess, gratuitously, that this cross-access effort the township has taken has been a tremendous success. And this is the typical story you hear where you have property owners who aren't used to it. I don't blame them. They get worried about it. But if you ask any of their consumers, once one of those little connections opens up, it's going to make their property much more valuable because it's easier to get to. Okay, that's all I've got to say on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
I mean, when I review it, I have some issues with, you know, the salient issues about signage, parking, and lighting that I'd like to see tighter information, and rather than going back and forth and putting too many limits on, you know, resolution of approval, we can obviously entertain an approval with conditions, or send it back and say redraft and address those issues. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'd really like to go back to ODOT personally. I know that's not really my role necessarily here on the commission, I guess, but again, I think we're missing a golden opportunity to be at the street here with this building. So I don't know, I'm not really prepared to make a motion to approve or disapprove. You know, the sign to me is, you know, I'm not as concerned about. The 2 parking spaces, I do agree that they should be removed because I think there is concern about someone backing out and, you know, accidentally backing out onto the road. So I guess if ODOT is dead set with their plan, then I'm okay with what's here. But I really would like to see ODOT reconsider.
I think the main issue really comes down to what ODOT wants Tim Hortons to do with reconfiguring the traffic, because I'm just imagining a morning situation where you have people going westbound to work, and then you have a loop of cars around, and some people drive smaller cars and some people drive really big SUVs and minivans, and then you have all these cars trying to come in and out of one entrance area, and then in the future potentially you have 2 other openings opening up, and the traffic flow just, it seems weird with how that would work. To me, the signage, I completely understand the concerns of Tim Hortons, and I actually agree with them on that. I think the signage is okay. It's just I think ODOT might be, I just have some questions about adhering so much to the eliminating all the curb cuts. And I agree overall with the goal of not having all these ingresses and egresses from all these different properties on Beachmont, but I think in this case, that might be a situation where we want to just keep the 2, the ingress separate from the egress.
Okay.
And my thoughts on it are, it's not really a great situation. It's a tough site. I would venture to guess this has all been discussed thoroughly, I would guess, with the ideas of the township's interests of moving that thing closer to it. ODOT, I doubt they'll reconsider just because this commission says, you know, I mean, it's
Right.
possible. It's possible. Anything's possible. But I think, from what I see in the staff report, I think I'm outvoted on the signs. I do think which I appreciate that discussion on that, but I do think, you know, the plan is calling for cleaning up those signs. And if, in my personal opinion, when you see those monument signs, in particular with brand-new development, I mean, Beachmont Avenue is one of those corridors. The township's done a wonderful job in refreshing it as there's been redevelopment, and I think monument signs play a large role in that. But I guess at the end of the day, and you know, we heard discussion about, well, there was some pushback by staff for more green space. They didn't really hear anything back, so they kind of dropped that issue. So there, I feel there was like a lot of give and take going forward, and just dealt a bad hand as far as the circulation goes. So I would be, and not to hold up the project any further, I'd be okay with approving it with the conditions that the staff stated, but then if you guys are, you know, want to pull the sign issue, I guess I'd go along with that. I'd be okay moving on it tonight, I guess.
Well, I need a motion.
Move to approve case 1-2017 PUD to pave the way for Tim Hortons at 7716 Beachmont Avenue. Applicant Greg Dale of McBride Dale Clarion on behalf of 7716 Beachmont LLC, the property owner. The property being located at 7716 Beachmont, Book 500, page 201, parcel 175, classified as e-retail business, to approve a planned unit development application to develop a 2,095 square foot drive-through restaurant on a .697 acre tract to redevelop the former KFC site that was constructed in 1988, conditioned on all of the staff's recommended conditions that include the cross easements be recorded in favor of the properties to the east and west, obviously with voluntary cooperation in the future from those properties being developed, the lighting plan be resubmitted, the parking lot being redesigned, the dumpster enclosure being constructed of materials to match the building, but striking the sign package condition.
Just clarification, you want the parking to be redesigned to be in compliance?
Yes, to be in compliance.
I have just a comment about the condition. So the sign, there were two conflicting site plans in the submittal. The site plan that was submitted, this site plan identifies a monument-style sign here on number 14. The sign package calls for refacing the existing freestanding sign. So we need clarification.
So I guess for your, are you saying go with the monument or go with the freestanding?
I think the majority here had...
Well, we'll vote. I mean, what
Right.
what are you saying in your...
To go with the freestanding sign.
The
existing sign,
okay.
yes. Yes.
And would you also consider adding a condition that they modify the landscaping plan to also show the cross-connection point, because it does not?
Yes, yes, I would like to add that to my motion.
And I'm sorry to do this, but the dumpster, did you include that in your... That was one of staff's recommendations? That was in
Yes.
yours? Okay.
Yes.
It's all 6 except the first one, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So, because I didn't hear number 4 either, the exit-only drive.
Number 4.
Did you say that? Maybe you did, I just didn't hear it.
Yes, I'm
Okay.
sorry, I overlooked that, to include just having the one ingress and egress to adopt recommendation 4 from the staff.
Okay. So in summary, I understand what we have here then. It's 2 through 6, with the number 1 being changed to a freestanding sign. Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Roll, please.
Mr. Ella?
Aye.
Mr. Reagan?
Aye.
Mr. Boone?
Aye.
Mr. Lewis?
Aye. Okay. Staff, do you have any questions for that? Okay. Do we have a meeting next month? Okay. Need a motion to close the meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second?
Favor? Aye.